Let's take a closer look at Rollei RPX25. I wanted to do some more film comparisons to Tri-X like I began earlier in the year. But to keep things consistent, rather than do them every now and then, I went ahead and got 49 different film stocks, everything I could get in 35mm from B&H and Freestyle. So unless they were out of stock, I got a roll of it. Now, if this part of the video seems familiar, it's because I'm using this portion of the video for all 49 of them rather than record it 49 times. So if you want to skip ahead to the H&D curves or the prints, time codes are right over here. For those of you that haven't seen this part of the video before, here's what I've done. So I wanted to use each film with the exact same shot, which is a headshot of me with a Kodak Gray Card Plus, which happens to have a red, blue, and green patch, a cyan, magenta, yellow patch, and then a dark and a neutral flesh tone. Then, with those shots taken, I bracketed every shot in third of a stop so that we can make sure we have a negative of equal shadow density to the base target film of Tri-X. Now, the reason I use Tri-X is because it's just been around for a long time and it's a very popular film. So it's a good base film to compare everything to. Then, once everything was developed, which was developed in D-76 at stock for the manufacturer's recommended time, I printed everything on Ilford using the exact same aperture, contrast settings, developer, and everything. The only thing I changed was my exposure time, and that was to make sure that I compensated for any base fog variation from one film stock to another. Other than that, everything was left the same so that we can have a comparison of just the qualities of the film. Now, there's going to be some differences in contrast, especially on the high end, and that's because the manufacturers getting their development time may not have used the same target that Kodak used for Tri-X. And that's okay. We're not looking at the overall contrast for everything. What we're really looking at is grain characteristics, tonality, how the film treats the shadows versus the highlights, that sort of thing. And we're looking at spectral sensitivity, thus the Gray Card Plus, rather than just a regular Gray Card. So we're going to go ahead and look at H&D curves, which if you saw one of my earlier videos on Sensitometry, I like to use pen and paper and make my graphs. However, my wife was really ready to make sure I was done with this project. So she put everything into a spreadsheet for you all. So even though I don't like them, I want to show them to you thanks to her. Then we're going to go ahead and look at the prints side by side with the same print made from Tri-X. And from there, you can decide if you like the film and if you want to go and use it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the curves, and then we'll go to the prints. Tri-X in the blue, Rollei RPX25 in red. This is not a good curve. This is really not something you want to see. So we have our typical toe down in the shadows, where we are starting from bad separation in the very low values up into straight line portion up through the lower to central midtones, and that's where things go bad. From the upper middle tones up into the highlights, we have a severe shouldering of our curve. That means we're going to have very poor separation in our highlights. So typically with a slow film like this, I would expect to have a smooth line all the way up through with no shouldering, but we've got a lot of shouldering here. So let's see what we get. Now, if you're wondering why the red line is so far lower at the toe end than the blue, that's just a matter of base fog. So this has a very clear base, low base fog. So we start at a lower density at the same exposure, but up through there, ugh, that's quite a shoulder. So let's see what the prints look like though. Okay, we've got our Rollei RPX25 and our Kodak Tri-X 400. So first glance, it looks a little contrastier. I believe that is because the skin tone is a little bit lighter, which we have seen with a few other films with a slightly brighter red sensitivity. So our shadow area is actually the same, but we are getting a little bit brighter on the red, but the blue, green, and dark flesh tone are the same. We're also getting a little bit darker on the cyan. So as with films we have seen from this before, the cyan shirt comes out a little bit darker. The red in my skin tone comes out a little bit lighter. But overall, our brights are coming out the same, our shadows are coming out the same. Interesting though, our middle grays are not, and that's a little bit to do with the curve and how it's separating tones. So the Tri-X is separating our shadows a little bit better. We're getting, let's switch hands over here. We're getting kind of a mid-tone or a darker mid-tone under my eye next to the deep shadow of my face. And over on this side, it's not separating those tones nearly as much, so it appears darker under my eye. But then come over on this side, and looking at the mid-tones of my neck, we're getting about the same. And then those highlights where the reds are coming through are coming out a little bit brighter, like through here, because my red neck is starting to show a little bit. But that's more of a commentary on my Kentucky lifestyle than it is the film. All right, let's zoom in just a touch and see how the grain structure and sharpness are for this film. Speaking of which, this is a 25 speed film, but to get proper shadow, we're at 16. So a little bit on the slow side. All right, here we are on the close-up. We can see we are getting very fine grain. It's a little hard to tell because it's so dark on the background, but again, I don't think the shadows separated quite nearly as well, which is why our background seems to be a little darker. But that is more of a curve issue. We definitely have nice contrast here and good detail. Here on the shaded side, we can see that texture of the background a little bit more, or rather the grain, since it is a smooth, textureless background. But we are getting good detail on the fuzzy edge of the silhouetted shoulder and good gradation down in the fold of the shirt. Here on the lighted side, we are getting excellent sharpness in the ribbing of the collar and the stitching of the shirt. And in fact, we are getting the detail of the actual weave of the fabric very crisp. The only other films we have seen that from were Adox HR50 and Agfa Copex. They were both high resolution films. This is giving us the same detail. I don't know if this is going to come out before or after the Rollei Ortho 25, but in case it comes out before, spoiler alert, the 25 speed film Ortho did not exhibit that kind of resolution. So it's nice to see that this film does have that sort of resolution. And here on the face, my eyes look much darker because that cyan is darkened compared to the other colors. And since I have light blue eyes, that makes a difference. We are getting a nice smoothing effect on the skin tone from that lightening of the red. We saw that in a lot of other films like, off the top of my head, what am I thinking of? Across 2 did that. I don't even remember what. There were some Ilfords that did that, I think. So, not uncommon. It does have a good pleasing effect for skin tones. especially Caucasian skin tones where red blotchiness might create extra contrast. So overall, it's a pretty good film. We are getting very nice detail and texture from that 25 speed, nice resolution, higher resolution than a lot of other films. So if you want a very slow, like 16 ISO speed, but very high resolution and sharp grain with very small grain, this would be a fantastic film to use. So if you're in the market for that, highly recommended. Just be aware of that lifting of the reds and dropping of the cyans. That's going to do it for this particular film. Thank you for watching. If you would like to help support this channel so that we can do more comparisons and get supplies for even more darkroom stuff, then please consider going to my Patreon page or my merchandise page down at the bottom. And I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.